Bengal Renaissance last time, and we had seen some of the work of that was built in Shantiniketan by Rabindranath Tagore, if you remember that. And over there, we saw a certain kind of Indian architecture that was being attempted, an Indian architecture that was an amalgamation of what was seen as taking the best from everywhere, trying to, in that sense, evolve an architecture and an art that would resonate with हमारा जो context है ना वहाँ से. So they were looking at Ajanta Ellora paintings, they were looking at Mughal miniatures, even in the architecture that was designed by Tagore, if you remember, there were elements of Buddhist architecture that were transposed onto these buildings. So that was one sort of narrative of modernity, I would call it, a certain kind of new national identity that was being attempted by the kinds of artists and architects in Shantiniketan. Right? So I'm going to start sharing the presentation now. Just let me know when you guys can see the screen. Can you guys see the screen?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Now? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the story that we kind of looked at last class. Tagore being, of course, the central character, and then we also looked at his nephew Abanindranath Tagore, Nandalal Bose, Ramkinkar, and Binod Bihari as these artists who were also who are also trying to evolve a language for Indian art, and really this idea of what is Indian art, what does it mean to create an Indian art, was something that they were constantly trying to explore. Today we are going to do something else. We are going to look at another sort of narrative that can also be seen as part of that movement that is called the Bengal Renaissance. We'll be looking at the work of Ramakrishna Paramahans and Vivekanand very briefly, but what we'll be really concentrating on, because it has direct relevance to the country's modern heritage, we'll be looking at the kind of ashram of Sri Aurobindo, which was built in Pondicherry. Okay, but very quickly, let's just kind of move out again, move back to the 200-year timeline. This is the 200-year timeline. And if you remember the dates, this is the 1828 when Raja Ram Mohan Roy established the Brahmo Samaj. Paramahans was born a little later than that. Vivekanand and Aurobindo, of course, that happened later. Okay. The interesting thing to know is that Paramahans came from a kind of Brahmin family of sorts, but a poor Brahmin family, and kind of became really interested in this idea that was kind of spoken of in the Vedas, saying that there is one sort of God beyond that can collect together all the various kinds of deities, and it is that one imagination of God that takes on many forms. And this very idea is kind of what becomes kind of really important to an evolution of Hinduism. I mean, you can see that even in the Brahmos, but this is even more kind of firmly rooted within the Hindu imagination itself. While the Brahmos were in some sense on the periphery of it, trying to evolve a new kind of religion of sorts, the Brahmos, which are new forms of worship, etc. So the reason why it's up here is that because, in 1875, an interesting thing happens. One of the important members of the Brahmo Samaj, Keshav Chandra Sen, meets Ramakrishna Paramahans. And he becomes very, very influenced by Paramahans's idea. And he then starts kind of thinking about that all of Hindu polytheism, which is polytheism is the worship of many gods, and that, of course, as we all know, is one of the characteristics of what is called Hinduism. And one of the main things that is being done here is that there's this idea that all religions are true. All religions are true. This is an interesting thing to think about, especially in today's India. And all these kinds of various kinds of Hindu gods can be collected together into one imagination. This idea is influenced by, of course, the idea of one God that is part of Christianity as well as Islam. And Paramahans is interested in both Christianity and Islam, and actually even practices some sorts of rituals, etc., from both these religions. There's also a move away from the ritualism of Hinduism, which is like ye karo, wo karo, ye, and this idea that at the root of everything there is something like the spirit, and Hinduism is in touch with the spirit. So this idea of spirituality, and we kind of, it's something that we've almost taken as a given nowadays in the way that very often people speak of Hinduism, is that Hinduism is about spirituality. So that also becomes an important part of the way that this movement begins to articulate an idea of what it means to be a Hindu and an Indian. What is happening, of course, is that Hinduism itself is undergoing a crisis. All these people have come in touch with these new kinds of ideas of religion, new kinds of gods, and Hinduism now suddenly feels that it needs to kind of define itself, redefine itself, and be able to, and to redefine itself, it goes back to the Vedas, and that is why this entire movement is loosely kind of called the Vedant movement. A disciple and close friend of, I mean, not close friend, I mean, very, very close they were, was Vivekanand, who was very, very influenced by Paramahans, who met him in 1881 and then started the Ramakrishna Math missions that we all know as the Ramakrishna Math. Okay. And of course, Vivekanand becomes famous because he travels to the United States and makes that famous speech in Chicago in 1893 at the Parliament of World Religions, where he talks about the brothers and sisters that I don't need to repeat for you guys. Vivekananda also becomes important because I think it is through his figure that the idea of Hinduism as spirituality, as well as the idea of yoga as something that is uniquely kind of this way for the body and the spirit and the universe to connect, seems to become entrenched as this particular sort of idea that the West has become particularly enamored by. He's just one of the people who does that. There are many other characters if you read the history, but we are focusing on him right now because he influences the next character in our narrative. The next character is Sri Aurobindo. Aurobindo was like a freedom fighter. He was one of the extremist freedom fighters in that part of the Congress, and sided with Tilak as saying that we need a more radical way of demanding freedom than the sort of non-violent thingies that were happening. You need to do something much more dramatic. Okay. And he then was jailed because of his extremist activities. And in jail, he says that he had a vision of Vivekanand. And Vivekanand, you know how spirits turn up in people's like these holy people's lives. So so Vivekanand came to him and he had a sort of transformation. Okay. And that transformation led to him establishing the kind of ashram. But he couldn't establish it in British India because he was wanted by the British as an extremist. So he went to French India, which was Pondicherry. So he set himself up in Pondicherry, which was a French colony. Over there, a French national called Mira Alfassa, she also joined him, and she became his partner in the setting up of the ashram and in spiritual sorts of activities. And she became what is called the mother. And if any one of you all know about Pondicherry, you'll realize that there's a lot of conversation around the mother. So this mother figure in 1920 actually moves to Pondicherry itself. And in 1926, it is in Pondicherry that they establish this ashram. The reason why this is an important story for Indian architecture is because this then becomes the movement that creates what is commonly known as the first modernist building in the country. And I'm saying modernist rather than modern because it very clearly expresses what we commonly think of as a modernist aesthetic. It's and you'll see that as we move a little further. But let's just very quickly think about the way that Aurobindo himself imagined what this ashram was. It's interesting to read this quotation from him in 1934, a few years after the ashram was established. The ashram is not a religious association. Those who are here come from all religions and some are from no religion. There's no creed or sect or dogma, no governing religious body. There are only the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and certain psychological practices of concentration and meditation, etc., for the enlarging of the consciousness. So you can see there is a move away from religious ritualization into this idea of the consciousness, a larger sort of soul, kind of spiritual imagination. Okay. There's also the idea that this is going to enlarge the consciousness with the receptivity to the truth, with the T capital, mastery over desire, the discovery of the divine self, and consciousness concealed within each human being, a higher evolution of nature. So it is imagined that human beings living everyday lives are somehow kind of separated from their true consciousness, and this idea of that we are all connected with one consciousness seems to be an important part of the Aurobindo philosophy at this stage, and also affects the architecture that is built for this particular ashram. But who are the architects of this modernist building in the country? Well, they were all not Indian. There was the first one, who's the most one that we kind of usually mention, is a man called Antonin Raymond, who's a Czech American architect. He was worked with Frank Lloyd Wright, and then was actually working in Japan, because Frank Lloyd Wright made this incredible building in Japan that was called the Imperial Hotel. And he got in touch with many sorts of kinds of other Japanese American craftsmen, including George Takashima, who's right down there. George Takashima was a furniture designer, really, and he was highly influenced by Aurobindo. In fact, got a new name called Sundaranand and lived in the ashram for 2 years. And you also have Francois Sommer, who was a Czech architect who worked with Le Corbusier on some of the unbuilt proposals that Corbusier had for some buildings in Moscow. So as you can see, it's this international. Immediately, you're able to see that what the ashram is doing is that it's actually its imagination is this international sort of space, place where all these different sorts of people can come together and find spiritual peace, I guess, or knowledge. The money for the building was given by the Nizam of Hyderabad, one of the richest men in the country at that time. He's the one who gave the money to build the building, and that's why it is called Golconda, after Golconda Fort. So what were the sorts of, I guess, things that Antonin Raymond wanted to achieve with this building? Not just Raymond, but the whole team. So this is a letter written by Raymond in 1935 to some of the team, I guess. And by the way, this letter is from the Aurobindo Ashram's online archive. It's a terrific archive. It covers every single scrap of information that was ever exchanged concerning anything around the ashram. It's a great resource to look at. Anyway, this is. So it seems as if one of the tendencies that the philosophy that needed to be established was the idea of simplicity. So automatically in the architecture, you find that they are looking for something very beautiful and a solution of great simplicity. Okay. And for that, they go to what is called modern architecture. And it's important. I'll show you the timeline later on, and then we'll see when this building is exactly being built. In modern architecture, we try and discover. You remember, in modern architecture, we try to rediscover the prime values to respond directly to the physical and spiritual needs of man without going through the prejudices which have impeded us during the last centuries. And here you can see this idea of modern as something that we get rid of all that other crap that has come between us and our true selves. So you rid yourself of all of that, and then you can find your truth, both physically as well as spiritually, body as well as soul. Baki ka sab nikal do. Another sentence from it that I've highlighted is similar to what you are doing in your philosophy. So there's something similar to this architecture that has to do with the philosophy. First of all, the free spirit, open as much as possible, and free from preconceived ideas. Again, you can almost see an echo of this in Nehru when he's talking about getting hit on the head by Chandigarh, when he's looking for a language of modern architecture for India. And then there's this relationship with history that is being evoked. We can profit from the practical experience acquired in the ancient buildings. On the contrary, we have pondered deeply on the lessons they teach us, but we have tried to translate them into the materials that the modern world has to offer us. And the material of the modern world is RCC. And this is considered to be the first real poured RCC building in the country. But it wasn't easy to build this building in the country because the craft, the technique, etc., the materials just weren't available. So all the materials, the steel, for example, had to be brought in from Japan. And you have to understand that this was in the middle of the Second World War that this building is being built. So the story is that the boat that used to get the metal used to be moored outside the shores of in the Bay of Bengal, and fishing boats used to go and get the steel and take it on the shore, and fishermen used to hammer the kind of steel into shape, and that is the steel that was used. The other thing that was also very interesting about this building is that the client, contractor, and architect were all working together in some sense to make the building because it was all fairly new to all of them. They were constantly trying to invent new solutions, discover possible solutions within some of the problems that perhaps might emerge through the process of construction. This entire building is almost handcrafted by these people uh, on site, and that is why it took a fairly long time to actually build. That kind of idea is very apparent if you go through some of the kind of texts that are available on the on the Auroville, not the Auroville, on the ashram's website. On the left, for example, is a letter that is really talking about many of the construction details that are involved with the making of the building. But on the right, there are actually reproductions of letters, and I just found these letters interesting because you have letters that for example, the letter above is really looking at kind of Sundaranand, which is of course George Takashima, sending a letter to the mother about just simple things like, okay, what kind of wood do we use? What kind of joinery do we do? This is not really nice. And the mother is constantly responding to Takashima's or Sundaranand's inquiries. And it literally like tiny little for the window ledges, we are preparing 3 small sets of formwork. And this is information that is sending the client, as it were. And the client is making decisions too. Meanwhile, there's a letter even below. The letter below is Sundaranand asking kind of the mother for a certain amount of money because he doesn't have money. So he needs money to go to America. So he's giving her the accounts. For a trip to Calcutta, I'll require this much money. For Calcutta to Kobe, I'll require this much money. And he's saying, Acha, please give me this much money because that is what I'll need. And the mother then says, surely I'm quite willing to give you 800 rupees and hope it will help you meet with no difficulty during the journey. So there's all this sorts of really intimate kind of conversation that is being had and as well as is being recorded by this entire process. And that leads to a kind of fairly kind of, I've never been there, but people say it's a absolutely fantastic building. So this is the building and the way that it sits within Pondicherry. As you can see from its context, it is really it creates its own sort of context in many ways. It's not necessarily responding to any historic context within this area at all. No relationship at all to the French kind of French Indian, I guess, colonial buildings that are there. Actually, also no real relationship to the physicality of the site because the entire building is cranked onto a rectangular site. So you create these really strange triangular pockets on all sides, and those pockets then become ways for become gardens. This is the building itself. It's made in 2 wings, built in RCC. The lower area you can see it, and you can see it in the plan. You see the way that the kind of crank happens on the side. That's because what is important to the architects at this point is is climate, is the movement of sun, the movement of light. The concern is not so much with the context as we know it, which is the physical kind of presence of a building or a street, but rather the sun, the wind, those seem to be the generators of the building. And you can make out even especially in the way that the building meets the street. This large compound wall completely detaches the building from the street entirely. Of course, this is an ashram, so it's about looking inwards very often. The sketch below is sort of representative of what Antonin had in mind of for his building. And it's a beautiful sketch that actually distills all the various elements of the building and kind of comes and arrives upon its most fundamental premise, which is that the ground, the building, and the sky actually are part of the same plane, and all you have is the framework of a building that can then become the place where people can live. This is the plan itself, two wings kind of placed, and at the crook is the kind of vertical circulation. Shirish will know the building better. I haven't been there, so I can't really kind of say. Okay. The section is a really interesting kind of section because one of the things that happens is that the entire lower floor is dipped slightly underground. So you come and sink into the ground, and then you rise up into the various floors with the various kind of spaces of living for the monks. We'll talk a little bit more about that sink and how it is achieved and what happens to the architecture a little later on. Okay. But this is the building itself. You can see the kind of raised sort of platform here. The kind of lower floor is at that level. The entire building is covered with these movable RCC fins that were cast on site. Okay. This is the floor where you enter. You can see the black Kadapa floor, that continues outwards onto this garden that has a few Japanese elements. If you look at the top right, at the right of the image, you rise up these stairs and come into the level where you then enter these corridors. These corridors are, breathing on both sides. Of course, on the right are the actual RCC fins or the panels that are kind of louvers, actually RCC louvers, and on the left are these doors. And in the doors too, there is a way in which air is allowed to move through because the wood is woven, keeping gaps in the middle so that the air is able to move from the corridor through to the room onto the other side. So this building is really imagined as a perpetually breathing building. Air is constantly moving through it, and it's something that, of course, in the hot, humid climate becomes extremely important for us to do. There is glass, but the glass is the sliding shutters, frosted sliding shutters that you're seeing at the top above the doors. As far as the gardens are concerned, the garden, as you can see, is a raised garden, and what happens underneath this raised area is that there's a large water harvesting tank that is collecting water from the roof, from the various activities that are happening in the building, and then that is then used for some other activities within the complex itself. What's nice is that the platform is absolutely of the perfect height that can work as a counter for many of these women to use for their everyday work. These are the women who clean the building every day, etc. On the right, the lower floor has a different kind of fin, has pivoted windows, which are also RCC, but they don't have the louvers that are the horizontal louvers that you're seeing in the upper floors of the building. Here you can see the Japanese element that is very much part of that garden. Now, because this was an unprecedented building in India, it was felt necessary that we needed to have, they needed to kind of try things out. So they really built a sort of trial module of the thing, and that is still present somewhere in the streets of Pondicherry. I had seen this image actually as part of a presentation made as part of the Frame Conclave last year in Goa. So that's where these images are from. That entire talk is also available online. Many of the details, etc., are being worked out on the site as they are working. They are kind of creating these quick drawings that are then assembled on site, and then they are being, so it's literally crafted on site by people who are experimenting with a form of construction that they don't really know particularly well. The interiors are extremely simple, very, very Spartan, as I guess befits an ashram. The furniture is all designed and made, most of it by George Takashima himself. He, after he goes back to America, becomes more well known as a furniture designer than he does as an architect, and his furniture then becomes really kind of influenced, and he also says highly influenced by his time in Pondicherry. More images of the interiors, again from the same online archive. That you're seeing within these spaces. Okay. Now these are the windows, the pivoted windows that you see for the lower floor, the kind of raised water harvesting tank is what you're seeing through the windows. Now we need to also protect the roof from heat because the direct heat that hits the roof would make this building almost unbearable, and Pondicherry can be quite hot and sweaty. So there's a double roof that's been created by the making of these, I guess you could call it vaulted tiles that are then placed to create an air gap in the middle so that so that the direct sun doesn't hit the roof. And all of these were also again cast and made on site itself. So it's an important thing to think about, that this whole building is being invented and is being made while on as within the process. The other story that is told about about this site is that there was a lack of metal for a lot of the kinds of fixtures, etc. And the story is that they collected a lot of kind of metal from the people who donated it, and then they smelted it, and the fixtures are made out of that. I don't know how true that is, but that is a story that has been told about this building. There's a lot of conversation about the quality of wood, for example. Now, this large piece of wood that you're seeing, for the banister. So there's a conversation about which wood can be good. There was wood with knots in it, whether we should use the woods with knots in it. And you realize that at some point they're saying, but yeah, why not? You should use the wood with the knots, because the wood with the knot itself has a quality that cannot be replaced by anything else. And that in some senses reminds you of the idea of wabi sabi within Japanese aesthetics, where the idea of aging and the idea of I guess, but where time is allowed to express itself within the age of a material. You don't have to make everything absolutely new. There's a way in which there's a beauty to the imperfection as well. These are just images of some kind of cool details that are there within the building, which I thought are nice. So, for example, this is the stair to the upper laundry. It's on the terrace, actually, which has this beautifully designed little RCC kind of stair. And on the right is the drying gallery, again on the upper floor, where you can see these, I guess you could call them these chains to hang clothes on, or rods to hang clothes on above. The floor is raised slightly with these channels, that's gratings that are there on the ground that collect the water and then take them all the way down to the water harvesting tank that we saw on the ground floor. Another image of the kind of details of the building. And this building, as a modernist building, is of course visited by Nehru in 1955. This is an image again from the website. I just think that it's interesting to think about, because we very often think that our modernist journey started when Nehru called Corbusier era. But there are many other modernists. There are very many other kind of stories to modernism as well within the country, and Golconda just represents just one such story, primarily because of its very expressive modernist aesthetic. It's also interesting to think about when Golconda was built, both in the history of India as well as the history of architecture in the world. So this is again 1900 to 1950. That's just 50 years. Now it is in this 50 years that modernist architecture becomes the way in which 20th century architecture is read and seen. And over here, between the two wars, the First World War, which ends in 1918, and the beginning of the Second World War, 1939, is where you have all of these buildings that have become icons of modern architecture that have all been built. The Bauhaus building in 1925, Villa Savoy, and Barcelona Pavilion, both in the same year. The same years actually, because Villa Savoy takes longer to get completed, and Falling Water as well, the kind of brilliant Frank Lloyd Wright building, all happening within that same short period of time, 10 years. Right? While in India, you have all these different kinds of imaginations of modernity that are all kind of happening, even while the Victoria Memorial and New Delhi are being built. So while Victoria Memorial and New Delhi are trying to talk about a British Empire and the last gasp of the British Empire as well, large monumental buildings evoking, if you remember the colonial modern lecture, the Victoria Memorial very self-consciously referencing the Taj Mahal, New Delhi very self-consciously referencing Sanchi. So you have a way in which even the British government is trying to redefine what it calls Indian architecture. But in the same year or similar years, Gandhi is building his ashram, which is evoking an idea of the vernacular as the Indian. You have Shantiniketan, where Tagore is, which is built in 1919, where Tagore is trying to evolve a sort of amalgamated Indian imagination. Uh, Hindu colony in Bombay, where Ambedkar builds his home Rajgruha with its own sort of modernism, is built in the same era as Villa Savoy and Barcelona Pavilion. And then there's Golconda that literally comes out of nowhere, that is built in 1935, starts building in 1935 and is completed in 1945. Took a long time to get completed. But the story that we know best, of course, is the story of Chandigarh, which is, starts in 1950. So this is actually what so it would be, so this is actually where Golconda lies. The narrative of Golconda is something that modern Indian, that recently actually, I think over the past 20, 30 years has become part of the history of modern Indian architecture. Um, because otherwise the history of modern Indian architecture is always focused on the Bombay, Delhi, Ahmedabad nexus, and and Golconda really lies outside that story. It is also important to place the Bengal Renaissance within the other reform movements that are happening, because there are reform movements. This is a time of many reform movements that are happening. A lot of them are happening because of the interface that is now very much kind of present with Western Enlightenment ideas that are coming from colonialism, from industrialization. So you have people like Dayanand Saraswati who are trying to, again, like the Brahmo Samaj, think of a new imagination of Hinduism. Brahmo Samaj is not necessarily thinking of a new imagination of Hinduism. They're trying to imagine a new idea entirely. So you have the idea of the Arya Samaj, also interested in ideas of the Vedas, that is established in Bombay in 1875. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan is one of the important pioneers of thinking about a modern Muslim identity. He kind of he's a sir, so obviously he's knighted by the British government. So he has, and he then starts Aligarh Muslim University in 1875, one of the most important in kind of educational institutions in the country. And you have Jyotirao Phule, who is in Maharashtra looking for evolving, really looking at kind of education as a way for emancipating the lower castes, and also education as a way for women to start accessing kind of modernity. And he starts his kind of first school in 1848 in Pune. Is 1848 the same year that the Brahmo Samaj is established? I've forgotten. Uh, no, 1828. So 20 years, 20 years, 20 years. 1828 is when the Brahmo Samaj is established. Anyway, I think that's what we have for today. Jin and Shiru, you guys want to add something?
Yeah, Rohan. Jin, go ahead.
I think maybe we can begin with a discussion about what the students saw in the last class, and with what we've seen currently. Should we begin with the discussion first, and then we can kind of go on to the blogs?
Yeah, absolutely. We can begin with the discussion and then kind of go ahead with the blogs. But we should ask, so I should stop sharing, shouldn't I? I'll stop sharing. Unless we have this,
Yeah.
I can always share it again if they want to look at something again. If there is something you want to look at again, just let me know. We can always go back. That's the good thing about these things. But for now, I'm sharing.
Let's begin with the respondents.
Let's see your faces again. Let's see your faces again in that grid. Yeah, turn your cameras on.
Rutik. There is Rutik. Rutik, we need your camera on, man. You can't be having lunch for so long.
No.
Your responses, you can ask questions. You can feel free to respond.
It's your space.
It's your space.
You do whatever you want to with it.
Aditi?
Yeah, Aditi, bolo.
So in the first so in the first term elective, we had like a debate amongst the group of whether the modernism movement is kind of like, does the glass construction represent the modernism movement? And then we had a debate about that, and it kind of ended up like it shouldn't have been the image for the modernism movement, but it is made to be. And then here we are seeing the start of different buildings for modernism in India, and then they are completely different. And now kind of we are just like copy pasting the glass facade buildings from the Western architecture here. So it is like we're kind of moving away from the start of the movement in our country. So it is like I didn't really agree that the glass as a material was the beginning of modernism movement, but it was a kind of like a 50-50 debate, and we didn't really end up anywhere about that.
Mm. No, it's a good sort of thing to think about, that because very often when we are thinking about progress and we are thinking about kind of modernism, we very often think that you use a particular kind of material and it's modern. But glass has been around for many centuries, na? So glass by itself is not modern. Huh? It is the way that
Yes.
glass was used that can be considered to be of that the glass was used in a particular way by the modern movement. Okay, right? But glass
Okay.
itself is
Yeah.
not. Glass is always there, na? But and it's also not as if all the people who belong to the movement used glass in the same way. So it's very important to make some, and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because we very often get these mixed up. Is these three terms that we have, to be modern, modernity, and modernism, are actually three very distinctly different things. One, to be modern, is to be contemporary. True. ये modern है, and that's an everyday language, ना? In fact, all of your families also must be using modern in some way. ये बहुत modern type की लड़की है, ना? यार jeans पहन कर आती है, बहुत modern type की लड़की है, ना? I mean, you know what I mean, no? So there's a way in which modern is used as a way of just talking about the fact that this person represents something that is new, that comes from somewhere else, that wants to change things. That's modern. No? Modernity is a phenomenon. It's a feeling. Like modernity is something that is larger, na? Like it's like, how should I put it? What can modernity be? Kind of this. It's like it's an urge to kind of do something. It's an urge to transform society. Modernity is something that we are going through. Yeah?
Modernity may be a step towards being modern.
Yes, it is, but it's also a phenomenon. It's not only a step. It's a phenomenon. Like today, we are living in a world with, at that time, you're living in a world where we've spoken about the death of God, where God was no longer central to the imagination of who we were. We spoke about how colonialism and industrialization had transformed like we are suddenly seeing machines all over the place. So our world has changed, many things have changed. Our relationship with nature, our relationship with other people. We are suddenly imagining that I am equal to everybody on earth. The lowest caste and the upper and the highest caste are actually equal. That's a very modern idea. No, it's not Purana. So modernity is a transformation in society.
Modernity's definition can be like frequently changing with time, I guess. First, being modern maybe is following Western ideas and all that, but nowadays some people think being modern is staying true to our own idea, like culture. But that is also modern, staying true to our own.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're right. So there are both these tendencies in the modern, but they both come from that same radical transformation of the past. Like we have to change ourselves. And what do we change ourselves into? Well, modernism, now that is a very different thing. Modernism happens within the arts, within culture, within literature, within architecture. It is a style. It's a particular way in which that idea of transforming society is expressed within an architecture. Now, whether that's through glass or steel or concrete or Chaitya arches is a different matter. But it is a particular expression of us trying to become modern. तो हम करते क्या है? Modernist stuff करते हैं. So there's a very clear difference between the two. So when Bhavika is talking about glass, glass is a material, but the way glass was deployed in architecture to remove walls, to let the inside and outside flow between one and the other, those are part of the modernist movement. So you're getting what we're trying to say, na? But glass by itself is nothing; it's just a material.
I think
Somebody
somebody Harshad,
या एक्चुअली हमें मतलब एनसीईआरटी थ्रू जब भी पढ़ाया जाता है तो मॉडर्निज्म को हम एज अ वेस्टर्न लाइन से भी डिफाइन कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि वेस्टर्न लाइन एज अ डेवलप्ड है और उनके कल्चर को एज अ डिसिम्लरी, जैसे खाने के ट्रिक्स को मतलब हर जगह के ऐसे रूल्स को फॉलो करके अलग टाइप का स्टाइल क्रिएट करना एज अ मॉडर्निज्म भी कह सकते हैं.
बट ये आई एम जस्ट ट्राइंग टू थिंक कि ऐसा कुछ है क्या? ओनली व्हाट इज वेस्टर्न इज मॉडर्न?
No, but no, that not, but according to the means previous history, like modern Western type.
Textbook history, you're saying textbook history.
Yeah.
Which places? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Harshad, you know, that is not, first of all, it's not completely true and it's not completely false.
Yeah.
One needs to understand that. That otherwise we always like to kind of, we always have this idea that it has to fall into one bracket for us to understand it. It is true that हमारा जो identity है, हमारे जो पुरानी identities थे, caste, class, gender के, वो when this new idea that of equality, freedom, etc. came at our doorstep, you're like, those modern ideas, okay, those ideas came at our doorstep. You're like, holy shit, these are like so completely different from what we have grown up in, and what is the kind of, how old-fashioned we are. We felt like that, right? It is true.
Yeah.
Okay. However, the encounter between us and them also went both ways. The West also came upon kind of, let's say, the Vedas, or came upon Indian architecture, came upon all of these things, and they were like, holy shit, there's all this incredible literature here, there's all this incredible kind of stuff here, and there may have been also a reciprocal relationship. Of course, that relationship was not equal. No one will say that relationship was equal. But what had happened by that time is that we were so interconnected with the West. हमारा इकोनॉमी इंटरकनेक्टेड था, हमारा सोशल स्ट्रक्चर काइंड ऑफ पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर ये था. तो कौन सा वेस्ट था, कौन सा इंडियन था, स्टार्टेड बिकमिंग वेरी वेरी ब्लर्ड. क्योंकि अगर तू देखेगा यार, गांधी को पकड़, तो गांधी स्टडीड इन लंदन, नो, वेंट टू लंदन, नो, and he came back, right?
Yeah.
Raja Ram Mohan Roy was actually a kind of like also studied, was highly influenced by kind of Western preacher to kind of start talking about the Brahmo Samaj. So the relationship is always one of dialogue, and yes, to many, and that has really affected the way that we see progress. Now, what has happened with us, no, as Indians, as Indians, is that we have begun to think that anything that is expressed by the West as something that needs to be done, we need to do because we need to catch up with them. Like we always act as if we are one step behind. Okay, so we become very like obsessed with trying to please them. We become kind of about wanting to always feel underdeveloped compared to the West. However, we don't acknowledge the fact that उनका हिस्ट्री और हमारा हिस्ट्री बहुत 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 डिफरेंट है दोस्त. उनके लिए मॉडर्निटी और हमारे लिए मॉडर्निटी दूसरी हो सकती है. ऐसे जरूरी नहीं है कि उनका ग्लास फसाड लेकर हम ग्लास फसाड बना देंगे और अपन मॉडर्न बन गए. एक्चुअली अपन मॉडर्न तो बने ही नहीं. अगर हमने उनका ग्लास फसाड लेकर हमारे बिल्डिंग पर डाल दिया तो ऑल वी हैव प्रूव्ड इज द फैक्ट दैट वी डू नॉट हैव मैच्योरिटी. Right? In which case, we are not modern. We are actually old feudal landlords trying to show how cool we are. That's about it. To be
Yeah,
truly
that's
modern,
like the copying things also. I think is like just copying. But if you enhance the Indian culture, like now, if we say in the sector of the ladies, like our sari is a famous now, जैसे पैठनी वगैरह as a, तो वो भी हम मॉडर्निज्म कह सकते हैं कि जो और कंट्री भी ये कर सकती है.
वो है ना कि क्या कि ये है हाँ, कि इस डिबेट में ना अगर हम मॉडर्निटी का डिबेट में अगर हम शुरू करते हैं ना, तो ये हम कभी कभी अटक जा सकते हैं इसमें कि उनके अगेंस्ट अपन हमारा कुछ लाएंगे हाँ, तो उनके सिल्क के वजह हम हमारी पैठनी लाएंगे. But what we are doing is that we are still only scratching the surface of it. The problem, the idea of the modern is nothing to do with your own kind of feeling that you're really great. The idea of the modern is to create a system through which freedom, equality, and justice is made possible for people. Okay, that is what the modern is. The modern is a movement where I feel free, I can be equal. If you think that through kind of supporting Paithani saris is that's the way to kind of talk about kind of justice and equality, then that is one way. Nothing wrong with that. But one shouldn't think that one is in a competition. The problem is once we place that as a competition, then we are forced to play by their rules. Then we are forced to say that तेरा ये है तो मेरा भी ये है. समझ रहे हो ना? We should be able to redefine what the battleground is entirely. We don't need to have the same battleground for modernism that the Western has had. They had other struggles. They have had another history. They have a completely different geography. Their modernism emerges from them. Their modernity emerges from them. Our history is different. If we genuinely believe that what society should be is equal, just, and full of love, then we should be thinking is that what is the way in which we can do that? What is the way in which we should be doing that? It may involve the rejection of what we have. It may involve the resurrection of what we have. But one shouldn't get caught up with this idea कि आमचा है म्हणून चांगला आहे. One should be able to kind of really think beyond that to what we should be doing. Yeah. That was Harshad, na? But it's a good question. It's a very important debate, and something that we continue to struggle with even today. Like when I just think about things like A.R. Rahman. A.R. Rahman was always considered to be like a film producer, but when he won the Oscar for Slumdog Millionaire, suddenly now he's the greatest composer ever made. Until then, he wasn't. Our validation comes very often from the West. So even now, and it's not as if we are all, and architects are also equally responsible for this, including us. Like if your film gets shown, like for me, my film suddenly became very popular in India after it was shown at the Chicago Architecture Biennale. They said it's good, therefore now, okay, must be good, na? Because we have not been able to evolve our own method of let's say evaluating things. We still look somewhere else. Our real task, if you ask me personally, in this country, is to be able to evolve a critical way through which we can evaluate quality. We don't have that at all. We seem to constantly run around and hope for somebody else's validation. Sahil has his hand up, my dear. Sahil?
About the same topic which was being discussed between you and Harshad. So what I think about this, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I had, my notion about this is all the thoughts probably that the young generation forms, all the opinions it forms is largely based upon the primary education that is being given to that person. And I suppose that the primary education we have been getting is kind of leading us to the way of copying the Western styles and not getting the unique approach to that. Now, for example, like Rohan just mentioned about Gandhiji being studying in London, but there are very few people who actually look at that aspect in the way that he also was inspired by the education system of London and maybe when he practiced in South Africa later on. So, but what we know is how he worked for India. We do not like we limit ourselves to whatever is taught to us in the primary education, and that maybe leads to how we have a culture of copying the Western style and not getting uniqueness and the freedom of exploring ourselves.
Yeah, I think that the problem has been the way that we frame the idea of pride. That there's this idea of pride that we need to have, like a certain kind of idea of pride, and somehow our pride is always based on arguments of uniqueness and exclusion. It's not. It's as if we are afraid of engaging with the other, thinking that if we engage with the other at an equal level, our identity will be lost. Which is why I find both Tagore as well as Aurobindo's this ashram to be interesting examples, because both of them are in some senses not necessarily saying that we are kind of from looking up at this great gyan that is going to come. Both of them are responding very specifically to the evolution of an architectural response to certain ideas that they have of nation and identity, and in Auroville's case, in Aurobindo's case, to the idea of spirituality. And what does that mean for space? What does that mean for materiality? What does that mean for craft? And the language that emerges out of that is this modernist language, but it is in many ways more contextual than much of the later so-called contextual buildings that might be there. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, Rohan.
Rohan,
I'm thinking that they should read A.G.K. Menon's interrogating modern architecture. Yeah, I'm putting a link over here for everyone. It's worthwhile to read, because he does sort of answer some of these problems of East and West, and the kind of include and the problem of architects and architecture in India. For example, he talks about when Korea puts the Vistara exhibition together, he still packages the exhibition as and the collection of architecture from India as though it is for a Western audience to consume the Indian architecture. Okay, he doesn't put it as he's very critical of this way of.
I can imagine. Because I also have very serious problems with Vistara, but you have to think about Vistara, because I mean these guys don't know about it, so we'll arrive upon the Vistara exhibition when we discuss it, because that is going to be definitely part of the course. But this idea of the India and the West is an interesting, or the idea of modernism in India is an important thing to kind of have as a discussion. Vistara was, by the way, just so that everyone knows what it was, Vistara was a very famous exhibition that was built, that traveled the world, and was designed by Charles Correa in the mid-80s. In the mid-80s, there was this idea that we needed to market India around the world. So there was this entire thing that was called the Festival of India that was created. And the Festival of India had dance and art and all of these things. And this festival was then taken around the world. Okay. Korea was asked to put together the Festival of India ka architecture section. And that is what became Vistara. And that became a way in which an Indian architecture was invented or created by Korea. And not just Korea, by a bunch of people, but Korea being one of them. Let's see. There are some questions in the Iyengar will come to at the end, but we'll start with Aditi. Aditi is saying something.
Can the design or construction of a facade can describe structures as modern structure? I think use of new material and the way they are used to mold into structures also considered in modernized structure category. Yeah, so I said to some degree, if the material used is breaking away from the past in the way it is used also. In that sense, there is something modern there. I mean, you can't always say in its totality that everything is chalo ye abhi completely modern hai aur abhi ho gaya,
Ek checklist hai.
Checklist hai. Okay, you can't say that. I mean, in architecture, the experiments are sometimes small, sometimes they are very large and problematic also. But as students, we tend to keep our eyes open at what these experiments are. sometimes it is only the facade that is radically different, and something that you have perhaps never seen it being used in a way. But that does not necessarily mean that the building is modern. Okay, I mean that's my contention. Yeah. So we have to keep looking, we have to keep searching what is modern in this. Okay, and ask that question of if there is one question, then it is what is the radical break from the past. Okay, as one of the sort of underlying questions to everything actually.
Yeah, but I also think that the break from the past has to have a desire to emancipate. Then
yeah, desire.
Otherwise, जरा हटके करेंगे तो जरा हटके होता है, you know. But there is a desire towards the Enlightenment values, desires towards liberty, equality, and fraternity. Then there is some sort of idea that I would call it like a sort of modern movement of like a desire for something. Yeah. Should we get to Iyengar? Okay, let's get to Iyengar. He'll be happy also because I don't think there's anyone. Is there anyone else who wants to say something before we get into Shravan?
Shravan. Okay, so
yes. बहुत लिखा है उसने.
So I think the general idea is that we see Westernness as this kind of thing. It's always a dual-edged sword, which we use to either demonize something we don't like, or it's something that we can, it's something we can either praise or demonize depending on how we like it. Like it's never like a clear modern or Western thing. It's never about that. It's just about what we like and what we don't like at the end of the day. Like, for example, let's just say today if I get a BMW, no one's going to tell me, why is this a Western car you've got? No one's going to say that. Like, okay, maybe now with Atmanirbhar and everything, you can get something of that. But everyone, like most people will be like, oh, BMW, such a nice car. But at the same time, tomorrow if people go clubbing or something, it's Western ideas and, what is this, you're like the whole,
I don't understand the point. I'm so sorry. I don't want to cut you in the middle, but I don't get what
I'm getting to it. Like, we never have this concept of, the world never has a concept of Western. Like, what are we looking at in the West as liberal? I mean, in America, they've turned mass into a political issue. Like, the UK, they elected Boris Johnson. I guess that counts as, not being as liberal. But the point is that they're leaving the Union. The point is that, we look at the West as this kind of liberal, hippie, fantasy land where everyone's, peace and fraternity. And this is this thing on both sides. I'm not saying that the right wing or left wing is an issue, but we look at the West as this sort of liberal utopia, but it's not. The West is not.
Or evil corrupting outsider. The truth.
Yeah.
What I think is important to understand, and I think Shravan has a point here. He says that the idea of Western, as much as the idea of India, is a construct. That we use it to build our own arguments. We use it to build our own identity. So West is not a thing. The West we make. Every time we have to kind of make an argument, we use this idea of the Western as a way in which we kind of are able to talk about us and them. And we then kind of use it as this loose term to kind of build the argument. Because the West, Africa is also to the West, of us. We never talk about Africa as the West. We always talk about a certain idea as Western. Right? That's what you mean, right? Iyengar? Shravan?
Yeah, it's not geographic or it's not even cultural at this point. It's just some mythical pony we're chasing.
Yes.
On both, True. On both to demonize and to appreciate.
Or all this intersectionality being tried. What is your intersectionality thing now?
No, just that the idea. That was a different point. That was a very different point. Should I say it?
Well, you might as well. I mean, because you are.
So yeah.
I love Fleur's little expression that she's given you. Like, what has?
Oh yeah, that's just a result of me not sleeping all night. I've used a bit of online slang in my thing, which should not be really used in an academic discussion. But anyway. So, when you look at India, for example, if you look at the West, for example, the West dealt with women's suffrage, they dealt with kind of racism and economic inequality, all at very different and far away points, at least in the inception, they realized that women's rights, race rights, and even economic rights were conceived in different places. Like you have the French Revolution and Marxism for the economic in Europe. You had women's suffrage, I think, starting in the UK. Yeah, sorry.
The point has been
getting
made.
the point. Yeah. India dealt with everything all at once. Like we got it as like a, kind of like it was all at a package. This thing, like suddenly,
So
like we
like. Is this an excuse?
No, not an excuse, but just like the way we treat it is different.
Obviously, it's a different history. It's a different history.
But
we need knowledge.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'm in agreement with that. Yeah, but your point about the idea of the Western being something that is constructed to kind of shore up our own insecurities or shore up our own identities is an important one that we need to constantly keep in mind. But we also need to keep in mind that one shouldn't unnecessarily evolve sort of these parochial imaginations that anything that comes from the outside is by itself naturally evil because it was grown on some other land. That's the thing we need to be open with. So the question is that we need a value system through which we can then say, okay, this is what we need to be doing. This is good. It's damn tough to kind of get people to say that now. It's damn tough because everything is relative. Everything is, iska bhi hai, uska bhi hai. So at what level do you kind of begin to talk about what is of concern? And that is, I mean, there's no answer here, but it's just a sort of question that we really have to start kind of considering. Oh my God, Atharva is saying, Shravan, continue this on chat. Let the faculty continue.
Rohan, sorry, because Shravan brought this up. What happens if somebody is riding a BMW and going to a bar or to a club?
Okay. Riding a BMW and going to a Jain temple.
To Jain temple. Okay.
More likely, yeah.
So we can't really. I mean, it's no longer West and East. It's here. It is amongst us, right? We are all in the project to become modern, whether you like it or not. Okay. And at the same time, we are all in the project of great nationalism, whether we like it or not. Okay.
Yeah.
So so it's not like something which happened then and then we are not. It's simultaneous. Yeah. It's happening simultaneously, which is exciting and scary at the same time. Okay. That one is you can very well be branded as something. When you actually want to be branded as many things, okay. So that's the difficult part in this, I feel.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think there's the interesting thing about what I personally found interesting about Golconda, because it's an interesting building, is that I had never really I had always seen it as a modernist building, like RCC used kiya and all. But while I was doing research for this particular class, I realized that actually that modernism has very similar desires. I mean, the desires of the architects as well as the mother in the making of Golconda are actually very modern desires. The idea to kind of get rid of history, the get rid of everything that's in the way, get rid of language until one is able to subsume oneself within nature and oneself, is a very sort of idea of the individual's relationship with nature and with the divine. The idea of the community ritual is something that is consciously denied by the texts that is written. So I found that to be interesting, to think about the conflating of this what is called Vedant philosophy with modernity and modernism as well. That is an interesting thing that connection is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Not a connection that we find a lot of people write about actually. But Pranjal has something to say. He's typing something. It's a long thing. So
yeah, she's saying that the architecture moved in opposite direction of use of motifs and highly decorative style of religious spaces to something very raw, very honest, etc., etc., etc. Truthfulness of material than its physicality. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
That is what was attempted, and that was seen as a modern thing, and I think that's interesting to think about, that you had that kind of modernism that arrived upon that came to India at a certain particular period of time. Not that it was really as influential, I would say, that we would have thought it to be. I don't think a lot of people knew about that building as much, if you ask me. It's still being discovered, as one of the stories. Still, many people who talk about modern architecture in India begin with Corbusier. So, and to some extent they may be right, because I think Corbusier's work in Chandigarh was more influential than the Golconda building. I think, because it definitely kind of set up many more architects who practiced, and many more buildings happened through that kind of angle than this one. This was one building that was made, and that is it. End of story. It didn't necessarily lead to anything beyond that.
Yeah. Rohan, with that begs another debate on how you value history, right? I mean, in the way you're saying it, that which is influential is really sort of picked, but there are examples and experiments. As architect historian, okay, suppose I'm an architect historian, right? I want to learn from many things that have happened across the landscape, and find out what were those steps that led to, say, Corbusier, or coming in and doing things. I find like the Mayo Memorial building in Allahabad as one of the very modern kind of buildings, also, so then the idea of modern in India stretches. Architecture allows you to stretch further behind in that sense.
Yeah. When I'm saying modern, I mean modernism, modernist, and like modernist buildings. Yes, Janvi is in the next class. Why is she talking to me here? Okay. This is Shravan again. Shravan is saying something. It's a way in which I think the idea of the spirit was evoked by modernist architecture. Truth being the truth, the big T. That for some reason there's this obsession with truth, and the truth comes in many different forms, and as if there is one truth, and the discovery for the truth is, I guess you could call it an outcome of the death of God. If God is not there, then where does truth lie? You're trying to find it. God is not there to tell you. You're left away.
It's also interesting because like this was the time, like if you take Robie House, which I'm doing as an AD case study, that's why it's on my mind, but it was built like right on the advent of the First World War. Like the world was in this kind of weird changing tonality where like, nothing was really certain, and we were leading up to a war. Like I'm pretty sure, like from what I've read about history, like something was about to change because of the political climate that was slowly unraveling. And it, like the death of God was a bit earlier than that. Like what was they had? I'm just wondering if there's like a sudden catalyst like that sparked this kind of,
We have a theory We have a theory. Our theory of design class has a theory for Robie House. We'll arrive upon it in I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We shall get into Frank Lloyd Wright and the Robie House.
Yeah. Okay.
I love that house, by the way. It's beautiful. Another stunning house. और कोई? और कोई नहीं.
Jin,
हमारा क्लास तो हो गया. Jin?
Talk about the situation of their blogs.
Yeah, Shirish. Yeah, we should talk about the blogs.
Okay, guys, please.
So, Shirish and I took a look at the blogs, and most of them just have a single post. Yeah. Guys, we urge you to kind of, be a little more active, continue to write. We saw some interesting ones, some quirky ones, and we were wondering, what those, what prompted you to write those posts. A lot of you, I think, also has everyone in the class made their blogs, because we don't see a total of 88 as yet in the list that has been shared with us, the Google Excel file that has been shared with us. So I think there are still a lot of students who are not.
Yeah. Please don't get performance anxiety with the blog, huh? Yeah. Think of it like, please don't get over agitated and like, nahi acha hona chahiye, nahi hona chahiye. Just whatever you have, anything, It's like a little box that you can put. It's like an idea box. Any ideas that you have, you can dump them there. A sentence here, a quotation there, an image there, anything. But just keep it alive. Like your do more. Like think of it as your Instagram page. Should we turn this into an Instagram project? They'll do Instagram, na?
Okay.
I'm running both right now, so.
You keep quiet. You are not kind of representative of this class. Is this clear, Mr. Iyengar?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they have to say something, Rohan. It can't be just us. I mean, like we can. What do we do? I mean, we have to say something, right? We can give awards.
Bhavika, let's ask Bhavika. We picked 4 people. Now only 2 of them spoke. Only where are the other 2? They didn't say anything. Catch them. Ask them to respond. Ask them to show us their blogs. Share screen. Show us your blog.
Bhavika, show us your blog, please.
Okay. Also, I just sorry before we continue, I just want to say we have very poor attendance today. We just have 51 students, and very actually even more if it's lesser now. I think now there are 48 students. Why do we have? I mean, it's almost like half the class is not here today. Yeah, but very poor attendance.
They are not entertaining enough. I need to kind of do. I need to sing some rap or join some hip hop or something maybe.
I'm saying that we can give awards in the end for the blogs, na?
Yeah.
The best
blog. No, but Janella has a point. Why are people not there?
Like the blogs that we discussed. Do you want them to present their screens, or how do we do this?
I don't know. Shall I share screen? Some of them.
Okay, let's do this. Let's not do because we are at the end of class. It's almost 5 now. 4.
Yeah. No, it's 4. 4.
How long is our class until, by the way?
4:20. We have 20 minutes.
Yeah, so then happily, let's look at some blogs. And no, I want everyone in the class now. Chal. Simple. I need a message being sent out on your group that that Shirish, Janella and Rohan are very angry that most of y'all are not attending class. I need a message from every single one of them as to why they are not here. My number is 98200-77274. I want 20. What? How many? 40 messages.
No, 40.
On my, 40. I want 40. I want 40 messages in the next 10 minutes on my phone. WhatsApp 98200-77274. Repeat 98200-77274. I need a message from every single one of you. I need a message. It can't be so that all 40 of you all have bad network. It can't be so that all 40 of you are like, oh, I'm ill. It can't be 40 of you that need to go and kind of do the dishes because your mother hasn't done them today. All 40 of you cannot have excuses to not be here. Simply put, all 40 of you are scamming. I need a message from every single of you. And truthfully tell me what you guys were doing. You tell me all were watching television. I'm fine, but I need to know. Message needs to go out to your group. I don't have you guys on the message, so please.
Maybe the auxiliars can put it up. Tanvi, Sahil, you guys can put it up.
Yeah, you guys can start seeing the. I'm going to go and kind of come back.
See, I'll tell you one thing. When we were in the physical space, now we used to herd you guys in the room. Okay. People used to run out and like chalo पकड़ के लेके आते थे. अभी इसमें हम लोग नहीं कर सकते ऐसा. We can't hurt you anymore.
Repeat your number, please. So that.
What's number?
Yeah.
Rohan. What's your number, Rohan?
98200-77274. 40 messages. I want them.
Okay.
Yeah. What should we do with the guys?
I think start seeing some blogs. Yeah, they'll put some pressure on them to do some work with them. Otherwise, they don't do anything.
Shall I share?
Okay, maybe we can begin with Isha's blog. Isha Nahar is here.
Yeah, I'll put Nahar. I have it open somewhere. Yeah.
I think she's not in the class today, though. I don't see her in the list. Isha?
Can you guys see the blog?
Hello.
Yeah, somebody saying something. Is someone saying something?
Yeah,
Who's
I
this?
actually Pritha.
Prutha, hi.
Hi, it's actually like my first week, so I don't really like, I didn't know about the blog. So can you just tell me how exactly and what I have to do in the blog?
Yeah, Prutha, we'll tell you. You just joined, na?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll tell you. I'll tell you what the blog is. Yeah. Don't worry.
Okay.
This is, by the way, this is Isha Nahar. Is she there?
No,
Can you
she's
see?
not there in class. She's not there in class.
She's not in
I
class.
just
Okay.
checked the participant list.
Shall I see the other one? This is. I don't know who this is. This is Aradhya. Aradhya is here.
Yeah, he's there. Aradhya?
Yeah, I'm here.
Aradhya has shared one post, which is he's read The Eyes of the Skin, and he's put a post on The Eyes of the Skin, which is interesting. Aradhya, can we get some more responses?
Yeah,
On
I'll...
some of the other things that we have been doing also, please.
Yeah, sure.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
The third one is skip spaces. This is Shyam. Shyam, you're there? Shyam? Shyam?
No, I don't think he's there.
Shyam is not there.
No.
This is Behla. Is Behla there?
Yeah, he's there.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Behla, but you have got a lot of posts on like
yeah,
business.
Bella, I'm very curious. Why did you make these posts? I'm very curious.
I don't know. Actually, I didn't make it. Actually, that website already had that. I don't.
Okay. I thought those were specifically that you made. So I was very curious to know why you made them.
But this one, this one you have done, right? Al Juma ul Anwar, the mosque.
Yeah, Al Jame ul Anwar. Yeah.
Yeah, the mosque that in Egypt. That is a post that you've created, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Shirish, did you share Kshitij's blog? He was looking at Minecraft, and I thought maybe he was interested in kind of games and architecture.
I have
Kshitij's tha kya?
No, I don't have Kshitij's. Wait a second.
Kshitij is in the meeting though.
Wait a second. Yeah, I'll open it.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, this is Kshitij.
That's yours, right, Kshitij? The Minecraft one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Architecture without physics. Interesting.
Shravan's also is a nice blog.
Shravan's nice, yeah. Wow.
Does making the site count as a submission? Because I spent 2 whole nights awake making the site itself.
Shravan, we have decided to give you the award already. So you don't have to worry. Okay, you are going
Is it conditional? Like I don't have to talk for like 2 classes or something and then I get it?
If you don't talk, you will get 2 trophies. Once in a while. Okay, where is it? Where's Shravan's? I had Shravan's open also. Just a second.
1 year of architecture. It's called the Jade Facades because I'm a pretentious little boy.
Yeah, Jade Facade. Yeah, that I know.
Shirish, are you showing us the block screens? Like, are you sharing them? Because I can only see a blank screen.
Yeah, same.
I'm sharing it. Your internet is low. I cannot do anything.
No, Shirish, even I can see only the black screen actually.
Yeah, it's all black. Should I share my screen or something?
Are you serious?
Black screen.
Okay, wait. I'll shut it. So what I'm doing only. Wait, let's see again. Can you see?
I got only one message so far from Vatsal Waghela, by the way.
Are you able
to
see class?
Can you see the screen?
No, Shirish, still it's the black screen only. I can just see the URL and the tabs, but I can't see the screen.
Why is that happening?
I don't know.
Teams, Zindabad.
It's Teams. I don't know. But anyways.
maybe Chrome has something that prevents it from being screen shared, because that Chrome sounds like the kind of app to do something like that.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
No, you can share your
Just a
screen
second.
through Chrome.
I'll open it from my mail and then show you. Just give me a second. So who did we say? Shravan, right?
Yeah, Shravan.
Okay, I'm opening Shravan's now. And I'll share it not through this, I'll share it through Chrome. Okay, can you see?
Not yet. Yeah,
Yeah, I can
yes.
see it. I can see it.
Yes.
Okay, so Shravan has written a story of 1 year of architecture, and he talks about his awning and the problems with the awning, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, I mean, it's like a continuous narrative of what is happening in his life, which is nice. Shravan, it will be interesting for you to share some other, or is there some more things going on?
He made some more
My Instagram is linked on the homepage, so you can see this here.
Okay.
Achha, you have Shravan is going to overproduce for everyone else in this class, I think. Deep is asking a very profound question.
What is it?
How are you going to get marked? Markings of blogs are based on what exactly? He's asking. It's based on your energy. That's all it's based on. The more kind of stuff you kind of decide to play with, the more things that you decide to have fun with, that's it.
No, Rohan, there is a mathematical model that we work with. It's called number of words. Okay. Number of words. Okay. Meaningful words. Number of meaningful words. Quantity overpowers quality here.
Hey.
Okay. क्या करने का Rohan? What to do? Jin?
I don't know
I think we set a date for marking. Anyways, now it will be soon time for a midterm marking. So we give them
Something we
time.
did not want to do, but we will now because we
Yeah,
don't have a choice.
I mean, there's no other option exactly, because we've also kind of given them questions to respond to, and like they're kind of giving them all kind of clues and urging them, nudging them, but still nothing seems to be coming along. So I think only marks now finally.
Yeah, the only thing that makes them do anything in life.
But if they don't get marks, will they fail, Jin?